Now, for more analysis on the latest Trump warning to Iran, we're joined from Esfahan by geopolitical and economical analyst Dr. Ali Elyader. Thank you so much, Mr. Elyader, for being with us on Asia One. Now, how is Tehran interpreting President Trump's latest warning of a strong military response?
Trump's warnings are plentiful, and his retreats are also plentiful. His claims of diplomacy the same. Obviously, his rhetoric is one that coincides with his lies. So what I think Iran interprets is a general stance of resistance and being prepared. Iran was prepared to retaliate in the recent escalations and violations and war crimes by the Americans. And I think it's simple, the stance is going to remain. And Iran looks to be the prepared party, and they will continue to be prepared. And I think the rhetoric that comes from Iran is taken much more seriously than the statements and rhetoric coming from Washington. And I think the markets are also reacting to that. Recently, I think it was the S&P 500 or the American stock market lost $1 trillion because of the statements from Iran, and the IRGC also with Iran saying that they are not negotiating the Trump administration, and the markets reacted. Meaning even the American markets, global markets, South Korea lost huge amounts of money in their market. They are reacting to the Iranian truth, and the rhetoric that comes from Iran seems to be more based on reality rather than the rhetoric that comes from Washington. So even when American markets, when the global economy, when oil prices are reacting more to Iranian statements, I think Iran doesn't take Trump's statements too seriously and is prepared to retaliate effectively if what he says comes to fruition.
So, Dr. Elyader, Iran says its missile attack on U.S. bases in Jordan was defensive. What message was Tehran trying to send?
Obviously, any attacks that Iran makes in the region, I think even if Iran were to attack American bases prior to the 40-day war, prior to the 12-day war, and prior to this several assassinations and attacks that Iran faced from the Americans or their Israeli rogue state partners, if Iran was to attack prior to these attacks, it would also be defensive in retrospect, because when bases were created in the region, whether it's in Jordan or in UAE or in Kuwait or in Qatar, and these bases were used for threatening Iran, provocating, creating regional unrest, and most importantly, killing so many innocent people, the schoolgirls in Minab. So if Iran had attacked prior to these attacks, it would also be defensive. And now Iran is doing the same because it's seeing constant violations of international law, constant aggression. Therefore, any attack to basically neutralize American aggression, which has been a constant over the last decades, in fact, not only these couple of wars. So it can be interpreted as a defensive posture. So the Iranian statement, again, once more coincides or is more truthful, coincides with truth more than the American rhetoric. So one can understand why Iran would be calling these attacks on Jordan defensive.
So Iran has condemned the US-Saudi airstrikes in Iraq. How is this shaping Iran's regional strategy?
Iran probably wants to show the regional players, Iran's regional neighbors, that the days of aiding and abetting the Americans to create conflict, to impose wars of aggression and war crimes on Iranian citizens, on Iranian leadership, is over. Therefore, in this, any kind of retaliation towards Saudi, towards other states is clear. And the Saudi attacks in Iraq recently, together with America, uh, were also in many ways an illegal attack, because the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq didn't claim the attacks on Saudi. The Yemeni forces, the allies, the Yemeni Ansarullah allies of Iran, claimed the attack. Again, these are belligerent, reckless actions by the Saudis and the Americans. And regional players should realize that Iran is a partner that has been close to them for thousands of years and will continue to be close to them. Iran was responsible for a lot of the commercial success of these Gulf Arab countries while their economies were emerging and growing in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. But they decided to import their security, their so-called security, which has been seen as being very shaky, as their so-called security that they paid billions of dollars for, depleted their country's resources to pay the Americans, didn't pay off. And their vulnerability was shown in Iran's retaliation. Therefore, I think the regional players and how things will shape up in the future is that regional players will understand that regional alliances in a multipolar world are more strategically intelligent moving forward, and that's what I think.
So Tehran says attacks will continue as long as threats remain. Does this leave any room for diplomacy?
Of course, diplomacy was the steps that Iran were taking before they were attacked during the 40-day war, during the 12-day war, and even the January riots in Iran, as the Americans admitted, was the first step in attacking Iran, as they claimed to have armed Iranian rioters inside the country. Therefore, despite being under constant threat, Iran pursued diplomacy despite the illegal war of aggression. And what was the culmination of that diplomacy? What was the eventuality? It was the MOU that was orchestrated by great diplomacy from Pakistan as well. So it was the Americans that violated that diplomacy, violated the MOU, and moved away from the parameters and framework of that MOU. Therefore, Iran sees that even they don't even respect their signature on the MOU, so constant threats and violations are there. And in order to have lasting diplomacy, Iran sees that these steps of retaliation and the attacks that the Iranian armed forces are taking ahead are perhaps the only way for them to make the other party realize that if diplomacy is pursued in the future, it has to be one that is lasting and based on reality, not one that that allows for the other party to not abide by their signature. That's how I think the Iranian approach is.
So now with tensions rising across Iraq, Jordan, and the Strait of Hormuz, how concerned is Iran about a wider regional war?
I mentioned in my last time I was on your channel that the main caveat, one of the main caveats that we always have to be beware of, is the Israeli intervention. We've seen Netanyahu's recent visit to Washington, and he attended the funeral processions of Lindsey Graham, of which there was video footage of him basically talking to Pete Hegseth and Rubio. And it seems that they were receiving their orders from the real person who controls the Trump administration, meaning Netanyahu and Israel, and their hegemonic Greater Israel ambitions. Therefore, I think if that caveat, that the Israeli threat, the Israeli violations and undermining diplomacy is the main factor we need to take into consideration. But I think the pressure on the global economy, the indicators that we can see, such as the South Korean market, stock market that lost huge amounts of money, billions of dollars, the American stock market, I think, lost close to $1 trillion based on the statements from Iran a couple of days ago. The global strategic oil reserves are being depleted. And I think the Chinese involvement, so there was reports of China giving Iran anti-aircraft or basically missile defense systems, the shoulder launchers. And I think the intelligence perhaps the Chinese are providing the Iranians. And I think China's involvement ongoing will also be very effective. And I think the global economic catastrophe, the eventuality of these violations, these reckless acts by Trump's administration that has been hijacked by Israel, the eventuality will be global depression. And I think that will provide enough pressure on the Trump administration, plus the midterms in the United States that are coming up. So the political catastrophe that he will be facing. And I don't think Trump, as he has said before, wants to be remembered as President Hoover that brought the world to a global depression and was blamed for it. He will be remembered as the president that took Israel's lead and caused chaos and destruction in the West Asian region that led to a global economic catastrophe even for his own country. And Iran is better prepared because they isolated Iran from the global market. So Iran understood how to deal with sanctions, how to deal with economic unrest. And I think time is also on Iran's side, and the pressure will be immense for the Americans to pursue diplomacy. The smart option would be to pursue diplomacy. The smart option will be to pursue diplomacy by the Americans, but we know that the Americans don't act smart, especially in recent months.
Dr. Elyader, thank you so much for your analysis.